Hey Peninsula City Youth, happy Friday. It's great to be back with you for another PCY Live tonight. And I have someone very special here to talk to you tonight and share some really awesome words of wisdom and just really dive into the word tonight. So give a big round of applause or whatever we can do online. I want you to comment down below and give a very warm welcome to Mike, who is going to share with us about control tonight. So here you go.
Hi guys, some of you may have seen me week one. I'm probably a strange face to most of you watching. My name's Mike. I've been at church for all of about 2 minutes, so I don't blame you if you don't know who I am. But I'm stoked to be here in the youth booth. Getting amongst it. It's awesome to be even a small part of youth this term. And yeah, both Jay and I are super excited to get to know you more in the coming weeks, months, and as the terms roll on. So we've been in a bit of a theme of God perspectives. Last week, Jess spoke about jealousy and comparison, and what does God say about that? And this week, I will be talking on control, God's perspective on control. Now, at the moment, with COVID-19 and lockdown restrictions and masks, it's all a bit weird, I know, and it's easy to sort of feel out of control. You know, we're hit with the reality that we control very little in the world. And at the moment, I know I at home, and probably you as well, just feel like every day changes, every week's different. I don't really control anything. And that's sort of the reality. Similarly, I want to go back to a story back around the time of the Exodus with Moses and Joshua. Some situations where they also felt like they had no control. Now, Moses came into the scene and the Israelites were in Egypt and they're crying out for help because they've been imprisoned, enslaved by Pharaoh and the Egyptians. And they're in this situation where they have no control. So God steps down and he takes charge, and it's very easy for them to give control in that situation. And similarly, again, when they're faced with the Red Sea, you know, this formidable force in front of them, they give control. You know, this is something out of our reach. God, can you take charge again? But soon after, the Israelites, you know, they start getting comfortable. After this Red Sea moment, they're on the other side, and we hear of them. They start constructing a golden calf. And they start worshiping this idol. They take control because their desires are that they want to have a tangible God to worship. And again, you know, a little bit further along, God has prophesied through his prophesied through the prophets. Sorry. He's told them that he's given them this land for theirs for the taking, the promised land. And 12 spies go into the land, of which 2 are Caleb and Joshua, and 10 come back and say, you know, this land, it's awesome, but it's fully inhabited by people that we just could never imagine of conquering. And so the sort of conclusion, even though Caleb and Joshua said, yes, let's take the land, the conclusion was that, no, we're not going to go into the land God has promised for us. We're going to wait. And the result is that they wander the desert for 40 years because they took control. They decided that they knew best. And you know, we do the exact same thing. I remember when I first started seeing Jamie, who is my now wife, who you may have seen on the videos previous. I remember I would get on my knees and I would pray at night. I would say, God, I like this girl so much. Could you please just influence her to like me too? That would be amazing. Then we could get together. I'd love to have her as my girlfriend. All these weird sort of mushy first date type vibes. And that was me. I was giving all control because I had none. And the reality is it's really easy to give over control when we have none. In terms of my relationship, thankfully, even though after 9, 10, 11 dates, I started getting more comfortable and I started not praying as much, and then things sort of took off. And like I said, thankfully we didn't have to wait 40 years before we got married. But you know what I mean? Sometimes we act like this. And I wonder how many promised land type moments, how many promises, how many, things that God, these blessings that God wants to give us, how many may we have missed because we were too comfortable, or maybe we're too stubborn to realize that we needed to have God in control. And this whole time we've just been tight-fisted in control of our own trajectories. The point is this, that it's really, really easy to give over control when we have none. And on the other side of the coin, it's so difficult, and that's another thing entirely, to relinquish control when we feel like we have complete control of our lives. And the point here is that, however, in the scripture, we see that favor and peace surround those who give over control to God. In Joshua 23:14, it says this, "And you know in your hearts and your souls, all of you, that not one word has failed of all the good things that the Lord your God has promised concerning you. All have come to pass for you. Not one of them has failed." It says in Matthew 11, verse 30, "For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." Why would we not want to give over control to a God who's like that? He says his yoke is easy. A yoke was what they would put over an ox, sort of the harness that would lay on its shoulders, and it would irritate and it would weigh them down around their neck. And God says, no, my yoke is not like that. It's not going to weigh you down. It's not going to be irritating. It's easy, and my burden is light. And this first point is favor and peace will surround you if you can relinquish that control and give it over to God, despite your circumstance. It's really important that favor and peace will surround you, or surround those who give control over to God despite their circumstance. Now you might be thinking, Mike, yeah, cool, all right, so if I relinquish my control to God, then everything will sort of fall into place in my life. But point 2 is this: when you give control over to God, you also have to submit to God's timing. Joshua and Caleb, like I said earlier, they were part of this 12 spies that went to scout the promised land. And they came back and they said, yep, it's good to go, let's go. Like, God has already won this battle for us. And yet the sort of consensus was, no, it's too much, it's too great. We're gonna stay. And so they were subject to wandering for 40 years as well. Even though they were sort of, they obeyed, or they were in alignment. They'd given control, but they still had to wait. And similarly, in Jeremiah 29, this is further on from the story that we're in Joshua, Israelites in exile again. They're in Babylon under foreign reign, under foreign government, under King Nebuchadnezzar. And God says, I want you guys to make roots. Even though it's not where you want to be, I want you to make roots, have kids, make families, create homes, and establish yourselves here. And to the best of your ability, worship me here. And that wasn't what they wanted to hear. They wanted to hear that they were going to be free and that they were going to get a king of their own and it was all going to be awesome sooner. And then this famous verse comes into play. God says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to give you a hope and a future." Now, we often take this verse out of context and we say, oh, this verse is awesome. I love it because it means, where I am now isn't where God's going to have me tomorrow or next year. There's awesome stuff ahead. It's just around the corner. And that may be true. But in context here, the Israelites were in Babylon for 70 years. And God actually told them, no, I want you to put roots down now. I want you to wait and I want you to worship me here and now. Don't be so preoccupied with what's coming that you miss out on the moment. And back in our text in Joshua, another instance of when the Israelites had to wait was God instructs Joshua. He lifts him up as a leader of the Israelites and they start heading towards the promised land. And yet in front of them is this big river called the Jordan River. And at the time that this text is written, it's in full flood, which means the river was, about a mile wide and about 10 feet deep. And God says this, he says, the way you will cross it is this. You will send the priests out first, holding the Ark of the Covenant. And I want you to tell them to dip their toes in the water and stand in the midst of the Jordan River. This raging force of a river. And that's all he gets from God. So, they set out. And the priests, I can picture it. They're down there holding the ark. They've got their toes in the water. It's just rushing past. Like, what is going on? And Joshua's there like, no, this is all God told me. This is all I know. And, meanwhile, the reality was that, the sort of the God perspective, if you like, is that way downriver, about 30 miles up, the water's banking up. It's starting to build up on the river banks. It's there. And then downstream, it's cut off as well. And how long would it have taken for the water to start lowering down where the priests and where Joshua were? How long? What must they have been thinking? Oh, we're standing here, Joshua, nothing's happening. We're giving God control, but when he's in control, nothing's happening. And they wait, and they wait, and they wait, and then eventually it starts to drop. We're told later in verse 17 that the priests bearing the ark stood on dry ground. And in fact, the entire nation of Israel crossed the Jordan on dry ground. Now Joshua was one of these first scouts that was faithful to God, who believed that they could conquer this land that God had given to them. And yet, like the rest of the nation, wandered for 40 years. Now, when God instructs him this second time, if you like, he's right on it. He goes, okay, I'll follow it to a T. He doesn't falter. He does everything exactly as God has commanded. And even on the other side, God says, build a little memorial to remember this crazy, miraculous event, and he does. And further on, many of you know the story of Jericho, where they walk around walls 7 times and they fall. What a random thing. What a time-consuming task. And yet Joshua trusts God and gives him complete control. Maybe you're worried that these stories are a little bit distant from what you're experiencing. And maybe, you hear this and it's nice. I kind of like the overarching idea of giving God control. Yep, I'm all for that. But I want us to come sort of bring it back closer to home. Maybe there's some stuff in your life that you are holding on to so tight. Maybe there's dreams or desires or wants or relationships, or maybe there's insecurities. There's things that you're just holding on to. And it's so hard to give control over to God in things that you really care about. Things that you feel like you've got a handle on a little bit. And just that vulnerability to say, okay, I'm trusting you, God, is so hard. Which brings me to my third and last point. God is always, always, always faithful to his promises. He's always faithful to his promises. In Isaiah 43:2, it says, when you pass through the waters, this is in response to the Israelites, when you pass through the waters, I will be with you. And through the rivers, they shall not overwhelm you. When you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned. And when the flames shall not consume you. It says again in Isaiah 40:29, verse 31, he gives power to the faint, and to him who has no might, no strength, he will increase your strength. Even youths, young people shall grow faint and weary, and young men shall feel exhausted. But they who wait, those who wait for the Lord, shall renew their strength. They shall mount up on wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They will walk and not be faint. What an awesome verse. Now, there's probably several things that come to mind when I say, give all control over to God. You've probably got a few things already loaded, and it's easy at the moment when we feel like we don't have any control to go, yep, sign me up. But I challenge you, wherever you're watching this from, look down at your hands sort of metaphorically, and there's bound to be things in your life when you really think about it that you've just got so tightly gripped. Myself included, that there's things in our lives that the hard things to let go of, and they're the things God says, I want those things. Not because he wants to stuff up your plans. He doesn't want to wish harm on you. He doesn't want to, get your desires and throw them in the trash. God cares for you so much. And if for a minute, we can stop pretending that we know more than God, and that we're so much more intelligent and wise, and we've got it all sorted. If we can just stop pretending and tell ourselves, God is almighty, all-powerful, and he cares so much for me, so much for you. And he really does want the best for us. And maybe it's the starting step to that is just praying quietly after this video, just saying, God, there's been things in my life that I haven't given you control over, and that, maybe it's repenting in a way, or maybe it's just writing some thoughts down. But whatever it is, I urge you after this video, have a think about what's in my hands. What am I gripping so tightly to that I would just hate to let go of? Because those things are the thing God wants. Because when you give them over, he gives you favor and he gives you peace, whatever your circumstance. And maybe it's going to take a little bit of waiting time. Maybe it's not going to be in your timeline. But he always, always, always delivers on his promises. So maybe we could start with something like that. What would it take for you after this video to just sit down and go, God, I give you control of not just the things that are easy to give over, but the things that are hard. And say to him right now, sign me up, I'm ready to go. Take me wherever you want me to go. That's what he wants for you. Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. Enjoy the rest of the week.
Testing. Yo.